every time my computer goes from the screen share that Jimmy does back to the regular Zoom, my sermon goes to a whole different screen, and then I have to re-find my sermon again. So that's what I do every Sunday when I'm looking a little confused, because I know where it is and then it's just gone. And that's just the joy of this technology. So a few months ago, I signed up for an online seminar called Own Your Value. And this seminar was done through a person named Lee Harris, who helps intuitive healers and spiritual people kind of think through how they might use their spiritual gifts, so to speak. And so he helps people build kind of their own healing businesses and things like that. But I like what he has to say. And so I signed up for this service called Own Your Value. And there were a number of really valuable sessions in the seminar, but the one that I fell in love with the most was in the last video. And he talked about the visionary, the architect, and the builder. And so I don't get credit for this sermon title today. I actually am borrowing it from Lee Harris. But I loved the way that he talked about how when we're building something, whether it's in our own lives, whether we're trying to create our own business or our own art, or as a faith community, there's the three elements that we need to think about. You know, when we are wanting to build something, we have to have a vision. We have to have an idea of what it is we want to create, and we have to understand why, and we have to kind of have the motivation behind what it is that we want to create. But then what he talks about, you know, he talks about so many people who have this wonderful vision, and they are telling everybody in their lives, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to do. And a month later, you talk to the person and they say, how are you doing? And this is my vision of what I'm going to do and how I want to do it. And what Lee gently points out is that sometimes we may have this wonderful vision, but we also need to understand that there's two other elements that we need to bring into that vision. And do we have the architect within us? And do we have the builder? And I thought it was just so interesting from so many different perspectives, so that we can, in our own individual lives, we can ask ourselves, okay, what is it that I'm wanting to create? Is my life working? Is my life stuck? And if in our individual lives we say, well, I have this vision of what I want something to be, but it's not coming together. Well, then the question is, maybe are you forgetting that maybe you need to have a plan? Like, are you bringing in that architect part of yourself? Did you sit down, now that you have the vision, did you do the second step of creating the plan and having the architect? And then are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to be the builder? Do you know what it means to then build this vision? And it can go the other way, right? We have people who are just fantastic at doing things and saying, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they're busy and they spend all of these years doing. And then they stop and they look around and they say, I'm entering into this new decade. And why? I've been busy, but I've been busy doing what? And perhaps that's because they are the architects and they know how to create a plan and they know how to implement the plan. But is it possible that they forgot that they need that third step of vision too? That they have the skill to make things happen, but did they take the time to think about what it was they wanted to make happen? And so what Lee talks about, these three elements, it's nothing mind shattering. And I think we all know this, but sometimes it's helpful just to have somebody point it out to us. And that's what he did for me, just, helping me think, oh, okay, the visionary, the architect, and the builder. So that's what I'm doing for you today, is just pointing out the obvious in our own lives. Are you a visionary? Are you an architect? Are you a builder? And what areas in your life are working together in a beautiful flow of interconnection between the visionary, the architect, and the builder? Are there areas in your life where you think you might be just a little bit out of balance? And if so, are you missing one of those elements? And if you are, that's okay, because none of us are totally perfectly balanced all the time, but sometimes it just helps to think about that and ask yourself, okay, do I need to bring in more of a builder? Do I need to bring in more of an architect? Am I still in alignment with a vision? Perhaps you had a vision for what you wanted your life to look like 10 years ago, but things change and life moves on. Is it time to create another vision? And so what I found so interesting about this was looking at it in my own life, but then I realized that this works for us as a faith community. That as a faith community, when you have 100 or 150 different people with different gifts and skills and personalities, are we utilizing those visionaries among us? Are we inviting the architects to say, this is how we create a plan? Are we finding room and space for the builders to say, here's how I want to contribute? And when a faith community is in balance, in alignment with those three elements also, it's really amazing what a group of people can do together when they have a vision, when there's a plan, and when there are people willing to implement the plan and make something happen. And what I also love about this is, even though I just said it's important to have all three elements within us, and it is, it's also okay to know ourselves well enough within this faith community to say, you know what, I really am not very much of a visionary, but tell me what to do, send me downstairs with the kids, give me a lesson plan, and I will make that come to life for them. It's really okay for people to say, I'm not physically what I used to be. I can't build a whole lot, but I have this vision for what we can be as a community. And I have these ideas, and I can share those ideas, and I can help us come up with a plan to implement those ideas, because it's all needed. And what I love about this is that when you're living in alignment of your gifts and your strength and your purpose and your vision, there's joy in it. So there should be, and there can be, joy in coming together to create a vision and something beautiful in this community. And as we are moving into this end of this year, and for those of us that have kids or are in school, it makes sense, for my kiddos, this is the end of the school year. And then summer is kind of like the beginning of fun for them, you know, even though it's the middle of the year. It's also sort of the end of this church year, and then we'll be starting up again in July. And so now is a good time for us to think about, what is the vision? Who are we in this valley? What do we want to create? Who do we want to be? How are we going to make that come together? And the really wonderful thing about Unitarian Universalism is we can have a vision, but even larger than whatever vision we have for what we want to do this coming year or the next 10 years or whatever, is that we also have our 7 principles. And underneath the banner of our 7 principles, we can create so many wonderful visions. When we know ultimately that our principle is that we value and acknowledge the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. When we acknowledge that we are part of the interconnected web of life. When we know that there is nothing more important than the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. When we are living our lives and our values under those principles, then we can come up with some amazing, creative, and wonderful visions. And so I want us just to take a little bit of time to think about what that might look like for us. We are coming out of a rough few years. And when I say we, I mean collectively, like we humanity, we Americans, we Unitarian Universalists, we individuals. It's been rough coming through a pandemic and moving through some of the politics of the last few years. And yet we're still here. And so my question and my invitation for us today is, what is the vision that we want to move into in the next few years? And I stand up here and I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful and I'm optimistic, and the optimism is not a lie. And I also know that we are here, we UUCGV are here in this valley for a reason, and we are needed, and our voice is needed, and our vision is needed, and our planning is needed, and our builders are needed, because there are other people who understand these principles, and they have a vision, and they have the architects of the plan, and they are building the type of community that they want. And it's not always in alignment with the type of vision and the community that I personally think we need. But without our vision of what it means to be an affirming and inclusive and loving community, we get their vision and their architect and their plan of what it means to have a fairly narrow, limited point of view that says there's one way to be in a family. There's one way to understand human sexuality. There's one way to make a decision. Well, you don't even get to make a decision on certain things. There's one type of education we have, and that's their vision, that they have some really great architects and they have been planning, and their plans are coming to fruition because the seeds that they've planted, they've been nurturing and watering and making room for decades. And so what we need to understand is that these principles of how life works, they're universal. And so they work regardless of what the vision is, regardless of what the plan is. If you're doing the steps, you're going to create something. And so my invitation for us as Unitarian Universalists in a fairly conservative valley is for us to decide what is our vision and what are we going to create together and what are we going to plan and what are we going to architect. I don't think that's a word. I'm turning architect into a verb. What are we going to architect? And what are we going to build? And it can be done with passion. It can be done with joy. It can be done with love. But it needs to be done. And we need to have the vision and we need to have the plan. And I don't really even know what that means, except I want to stand up here today and say that we have the power to create whatever we want to envision. And we don't have to do it as a reaction. We don't have to do it because we're scared. We don't have to do it because we're angry. We can have a vision and a plan and an action step, my grammar today, but we can do it based on who we are, who these 7 principles help us choose to become. And that's what I'm hopeful for. That's what I'm inspired about. That's why I'm excited that we're looking for a new director of religious education who can help us vision and be part of who we want to be in this valley, because we need it. We need the OWL program to be implemented and taught in this valley this summer. We need people who are willing and able to teach that. We need the visionaries who can articulate what that might mean for our kids. We need the architects to come up with the plan to get the word out. Because we also can't just put blinders on. I don't know how many of you saw, but the president of the school board posted something on her personal Facebook page last week, making fun of transgender children. The president of the District 51 school board. Okay, so it's not okay. It's not okay. And yet we have to have a bigger vision than just getting angry. We can be angry, but we have to be creating something better. And we're needed with this Supreme Court leak. We need a plan. We need a vision for what it means. We need people willing to stand up. And so when you zoom in on Sunday mornings, or when you show up in the sanctuary on Sunday mornings, and when I'm speaking on Sunday mornings, we're not here just because we're UUs and we just like the title Unitarian Universalist. We're here because Unitarian Universalism needs to stand for something. And it needs to be a safe place where people can come together and say, we have a vision of the world we want to create. And I'm with like-minded people in a safe place that I get to implement that plan and make it happen, and know that I'm not alone, and know that our voice will meld with other Unitarian Universalist voices. Not only in the Valley, but in Colorado and in the country and in the world. And our voice will meld with the First Congregational Church, who was doing the same things, and Koinonia and Center for Spiritual Living. We're not alone, but we are needed, and we need to not be silent. And so I think what I want to do is, we have a little bit of time. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to open it up for us to have a conversation about what's a vision of who we want to be in this valley moving forward might be, so that we know why we're here, and so that we know why we're showing up on Sundays. And so we know why and how to feed each other, to sustain each other, to keep us going. So I like the words that Lee Harris says a lot in a lot of his talks. He always says, "You are needed, and now is your time." And so I'm going to change that just a little bit, and I'm going to say, "We are needed, and now is our time." And with that, I'm going to invite you to come up and share your voices with what that means for us.